after my husband died, I went to spend a few days with my son. One night, he said, "This isn't a charity. You're just another mouth to feed." I smiled, packed my bag, and left before dawn. A week later, his name flashed on my phone 27 times. But my freedom demanded a different choice. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The house felt too big without Craig's breathing beside me at night. 3 months since the funeral, and I still reached across the cold sheets each morning, expecting to find his warm shoulder. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating, pressing against my eardrums like water in a deep pool. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring my coffee in endless circles, watching the cream swirl into nothingness. The spoon clinked against porcelain, a sound that once annoyed Craig. Now I craved even that small irritation. Anything to fill the void that had swallowed my 62-year-old life whole. The doorbell's shrill cry cut through my reverie. Through the peephole, I saw my son Charlie's familiar silhouette, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. My heart lifted despite itself. Maybe he'd come to check on me, to suggest we have lunch together like we used to when he was younger. "Mom." He stepped inside without waiting for invitation, his eyes scanning the living room with calculated assessment. "We need to talk." I followed him to the couch where Craig used to watch his evening news. Charlie sat forward, elbows on knees, fingers interlaced, his serious business pose. The same posture he'd adopted as a teenager when asking for car keys or money for college. "You can't stay here alone," he said, his voice carrying that edge of authority he'd perfected in his corporate job. "It's not safe. You're 62, Mom. What if something happens?" The coffee cup trembled in my hands. "I'm fine, Charlie. I've been managing. He gestured around the room, and I suddenly saw it through his eyes. The stack of unopened mail on the side table, the dust gathering on Craig's reading glasses, the wilted flowers from last week's grocery trip. This isn't managing. This is... He paused, searching for the right word. "This is barely surviving." Heat crept up my neck. "I'm grieving, not dying." "Come stay with us," he said, leaning back with the confidence of someone who'd already made the decision. "Rosie's been asking about you. We have the guest room, and the kids would love having Grandma around more." The kids. Cynthia, 15, barely acknowledged my existence beyond obligatory holiday hugs. George, 12, lived in a world of video games and friends I'd never met. When had I become peripheral in their lives? "I don't want to impose," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt myself weakening. The prospect of not eating dinner alone, of hearing voices in the evening, of mattering to someone again, it was seductive. "You're not imposing. You're family." Charlie's smile was gentle, but his eyes held something else. Relief, perhaps, or calculation. "Besides, you could help with groceries, maybe pitch in with utilities. It would be good for everyone." There it was, the practical Charlie, always thinking about the bottom line. I should have felt insulted, but instead I felt grateful that he still saw me as useful, that I could contribute something, even if it was just my social security check. "Just until I figure things out," I heard myself saying. "Of course," he squeezed my shoulder. "Just temporarily." 2 weeks later, I sat in their guest room, a converted office with a fold-out couch and boxes of Christmas decorations stacked in the corner, listening to the sounds of a family that moved around me like water around a stone. Charlie left for work before dawn. Rosie herded the kids through breakfast with military precision, her voice sharp with morning stress. The children's voices faded as they headed to school, leaving me alone in a house that wasn't mine, surrounded by the detritus of other people's lives. I tried to make myself useful. I did laundry, folded clothes that weren't mine, organized pantries that had their own mysterious logic. Rosie accepted my help with polite smiles that never reached her eyes. When I offered to cook dinner, she'd hover in the kitchen, rearranging my preparations with subtle corrections. "Oh, Charlie doesn't like his chicken that well done," she'd say, sliding the pan from my hands. "And the kids are picky about vegetables." I became a ghost in their routine, visible only when needed, invisible when inconvenient. Dinner conversations flowed around me. Charlie talked about work projects I couldn't follow, Rosie discussed school committees I wasn't part of. The children shared stories about friends I'd never meet. "Grandma, can you pass the salt?" George would ask, and I'd feel momentarily included until I realized I was simply the closest hand to the shaker. 3 weeks into my stay, I overheard Rosie on the phone with her sister. I'd come downstairs for water, and her voice carried from the kitchen. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she was saying. "She's here all the time. Just sitting in that room, watching TV. It's depressing." I froze on the stairs, my bare feet suddenly ice cold against the wood. "I know she's grieving," Rosie continued, "but she barely contributes to conversations. It's like living with a sad ghost. The kids are starting to notice." My chest tightened. I pressed my back against the wall, wishing I could disappear into it. Charlie thinks she should find her own place soon, but he's too nice to say it. And honestly, the money helps with groceries and bills, so we're stuck. The money helps. So I wasn't family. I was a paying tenant whose rent bought tolerance for my presence. I crept back upstairs, each step echoing the rhythm of my humiliation. That night at dinner, I watched them differently. Noted how Rosie's smiles were performances, how Charlie's questions about my day were obligations, how the children treated me with the polite distance reserved for elderly relatives they barely knew. "Mom, you seem quiet tonight," Charlie said, cutting into his chicken with surgical precision. "Just tired," I replied, pushing food around my plate. "Maybe you should start thinking about getting back out there," Rosie suggested, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. "There are senior centers, book clubs, volunteer opportunities. It might be good for you to have your own activities. Your own activities. Translation: your own life that doesn't involve ours." "That's a great idea," I said, matching her tone. "I should start looking into things." But that night, lying on the fold-out couch that never quite unfolded properly, I stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of my displacement. I was 62 years old, a widow who'd raised 2 children and supported a husband through 41 years of marriage. I'd been a real estate agent, a Sunday school teacher, a volunteer at the hospital. I'd hosted dinner parties and organized neighborhood fundraisers. I'd had a life, a purpose, an identity. Now I was a burden with a bank account. The revelation came 3 days later, sharp and clean as a blade between the ribs. I was folding laundry in the basement when I heard Charlie and Rosie arguing upstairs. Their voices carried through the thin ceiling, words muffled but emotions clear. "Can't keep pretending this is temporary. Your mother, not mine. Financial help is one thing, but—" I climbed the stairs slowly, following the sound of my son's voice. "She's depressing the kids, Jen. Cynthia won't bring friends over anymore. George asked me yesterday if Grandma is dying because she always looks so sad. So what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we give her a timeline. A gentle push toward independence. A gentle push. As if I were a baby bird being encouraged from the nest, instead of a woman who'd given him life and then spent 26 years nurturing him into the man who now wanted to push me away." I stood in the hallway, invisible again, listening to my son and daughter-in-law plan my exile with the same casual efficiency they used to plan vacation schedules. That night, Charlie knocked on my door after the kids were in bed. I was reading, or pretending to read, a novel I'd picked up from the library. "Mom, we need to discuss your long-term plans," he said, settling into the desk chair with characteristic directness. "Of course." I closed the book, keeping my finger between the pages as if I might return to it soon. "You've been here almost a month now. It's been great having you, but—" He paused, searching for diplomatic language. "We think it might be time for you to consider more permanent arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" "There are some really nice senior living communities nearby. Places where you'd have your own space but also built-in social opportunities. Or maybe an apartment closer to your old neighborhood. Built-in social opportunities. A euphemism for warehousing the inconvenient elderly." "I see." I opened the book again, pretending to scan the page. "And when would you like me to make this transition?" "There's no rush," he said quickly. "Maybe in the next couple of weeks? Just so you have time to look at options." "A couple of weeks. Enough time to find somewhere else to be forgotten, but not long enough to become a permanent fixture in their lives." "That sounds reasonable," I said. surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. Charlie's relief was palpable. Great. And of course we'll help however we can. With the search, moving, whatever you need. After he left, I sat in the darkness of my temporary room and felt something shift inside me. Not the crushing despair I'd expected, but something sharper, cleaner. Anger, perhaps, or clarity. I was not a problem to be solved, or a burden to be managed. I was Pamela Catherine Mitchell, and I'd been someone before I became Craig's widow and Charlie's inconvenient mother. I'd forgotten that person somewhere in the fog of grief and gratitude, but she was still there, waiting. The next morning, I made coffee before anyone else was awake and sat at their kitchen table, planning my escape from their charity. I spent the next 3 days playing the role they expected of me, the grateful, compliant mother searching for her next destination. I browsed apartment listings on their computer, nodding appreciatively when Rosie showed me brochures for senior communities with names like Golden Years Manor and Sunset Village. Each glossy pamphlet featured the same stock photos: silver-haired women playing bridge, men tending small gardens, everyone smiling with the forced cheer of dental advertisements. "This one looks lovely," Rosie would say, pointing to a picture of a cramped efficiency apartment. "And it's only 40 minutes away, so we can visit regularly." Regularly. Another lie wrapped in consideration. But while I played their game during the day, I was planning something else entirely. Late at night, when the house settled into silence, I sat at their kitchen table with my laptop and my bank statements, calculating possibilities they couldn't imagine. Craig had been methodical about money, an engineer's approach to everything, including death. Our house was paid off. His life insurance, combined with my Social Security and the modest inheritance from my mother, gave me more options than Charlie realized. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Enough to choose my own path instead of accepting the one they were so eagerly paving for me. The revelation came from an unexpected source, a travel blog I'd stumbled across while pretending to search for apartments. A 68-year-old woman from Minnesota had sold everything after her husband's death and was traveling through South America, documenting her adventures with photos that blazed with color and life. In one picture, she stood on a beach in Brazil, her gray hair wild in the ocean wind, her face luminous with something I'd forgotten existed: joy. I stared at that image until my eyes blurred. When had I last felt joy? When had I last felt anything besides grief and gratitude and the suffocating weight of being someone else's obligation? By Thursday morning, I had a plan. Not the careful, responsible plan Charlie would approve of, but something wild and necessary. Something that would remind me I was still alive. I waited until the house was empty. Charlie at work, Rosie at her yoga class, the children at school. Then I called my travel agent, a woman I'd used for family vacations when the kids were young. "Pamela, I was so sorry to hear about Craig. How are you holding up?" "I'm ready to live again, Anya. I want to book a trip to Brazil." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Brazil?" Anya's voice climbed an octave. "For how long?" "I don't know yet. A month to start. Maybe longer." "Wow. Okay. This is unexpected. Are you sure? I mean, traveling alone at your age to a foreign country. At my age. As if 62 meant I should content myself with crossword puzzles and early bird dinners. "I'm sure," I said. And for the first time in months, I was. Anya walked me through the details with professional efficiency masked by personal concern. Flights to Recife, a coastal city in northeast Brazil known for its beaches and Portuguese colonial architecture. A small hotel in the historic district, highly rated for safety and cleanliness. Travel insurance that would cover everything from lost luggage to medical emergencies. "The exchange rate is favorable right now," Anya said. "Your dollar will go much further there than in the U.S. You could live quite comfortably for months if you wanted." Months. The word tasted like possibility. "Book it," I said. "I leave in 1 week." The hardest part was the performance I had to maintain for the next 6 days. I continued my charade of apartment hunting, even scheduling 2 viewings to maintain the illusion. The first was a sterile studio in a complex that smelled like industrial disinfectant and loneliness. The second was a one-bedroom in a building where the elevator wheezed and the hallways echoed with daytime television. They're both lovely, I told Charlie that evening, watching him cut his steak with mechanical precision. I'm having trouble deciding. Take your time, he said, but his relief was obvious. There's no rush. No rush to be rid of me. How generous. Rosie leaned forward with artificial enthusiasm. Did you see any you liked? I could go with you to look at more if you want. Thank you, but I think I can manage. I smiled at her, the same polite smile she'd been giving me for weeks. I've been making decisions longer than you've been alive, dear. Her eyes flickered with something, surprise perhaps, or annoyance, but she recovered quickly. Of course. I just meant if you wanted a second opinion. I appreciate the offer. I turned to Charlie. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about selling the house. This got his full attention. His fork paused midway to his mouth. Selling the house? Are you sure? That's a big decision, Mom. It's too big for one person, and the upkeep is expensive. Plus, the market's good right now. I'd rehearsed this conversation, anticipating his objections. I thought you might want to list it for me since you have that friend in real estate. Charlie exchanged a glance with Rosie. Dollar signs danced in their eyes, the prospect of a sales commission, or perhaps the hope that I'd be more generous with the proceeds than they deserved. I could talk to Rick, Charlie said slowly. But you shouldn't rush into anything. Maybe rent it out first, see how that goes? Rent it out. Keep it as an anchor, a reason to return to a life I was finished with. I think selling is the right choice, I said firmly. Fresh start and all that. That night, I finalized my preparations. I'd been withdrawing cash in small amounts all week. Nothing large enough to trigger questions, but enough to give me freedom once I arrived. I packed light. Summer clothes, comfortable shoes, my laptop, and my passport, which I'd renewed 2 years earlier for a European cruise that Craig's illness had canceled. My phone buzzed with a text from my younger sister in California. How are things with Charlie? Are you settling in okay? Everly meant well, but she lived in her own bubble of yoga retreats and wine country weekends. She'd offered her guest room after Craig's funeral, but it had been a hollow gesture. We both knew she preferred our relationship in small doses, preferably by phone. Fine, I texted back, making some changes. Friday evening brought the performance I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Charlie knocked on my door after dinner, his face wearing the expression of a man about to deliver difficult news. Mom, I hope you won't take this the wrong way, he began, settling into the desk chair that had become his preferred stage for these conversations. But Rosie and I have been talking, and we think maybe it's time to set a firmer timeline for your transition. Oh? I kept my voice neutral, my eyes focused on the book in my hands. It's just that the kids are starting the new school year next week, and Rosie's going back to work part-time and… He gestured vaguely, as if the air itself contained his reasoning. We need to establish more of a routine, you understand. A routine that didn't include the inconvenient presence of his grieving mother. What kind of timeline? I asked. We were thinking this weekend might be good for you to decide on a place. Move in next week. Get settled before everything gets crazy with fall schedules. This weekend. 4 days' notice to pack up the remnants of my life and relocate to whatever institutional setting would have me. That's quite sudden, I said mildly. I know, and I'm sorry. But we've given you almost 6 weeks to think about it, and… He spread his hands, as if helplessness were an excuse for cruelty. This isn't a charity, Mom. You're just another mouth to feed, and with Rosie going back to work, it's going to be tight around here. The words hit like a physical blow. Another mouth to feed. As if I hadn't been paying for groceries and utilities. As if I hadn't raised him, fed him, clothed him, paid for his college education, and supported his dreams for 26 years. I looked up from my book and met his eyes. I see. Charlie must have realized how his words sounded because he backtracked quickly. I don't mean it like that. It's just practical. You'd be happier in your own place anyway. With people your own age, activities designed for old people. For seniors, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with warehousing inconvenient relatives where they wouldn't depress the children or interfere with family routines. You're absolutely right, I said, closing the book with a soft snap. It's time for me to make a change. Relief flooded his features. Great. So this weekend we can look at those apartments, maybe put down a deposit. Actually, I've already made arrangements. His relief shifted to confusion. Arrangements? I'm leaving Sunday morning. My ride to the airport comes at 6. Airport? The word seemed to stick in his throat. Where are you going? Brazil. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the dishwasher humming in the kitchen below. Charlie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Brazil, he repeated finally. As in South America? As in the country where people speak Portuguese and the beaches are beautiful and the cost of living is a fraction of what it is here. I smiled at him, the first genuine smile I'd given anyone in months. I hear Recife is lovely this time of year. You can't be serious. Charlie stood up, pacing to the window and back. Mom, you don't speak Portuguese. You don't know anyone there. You've never even traveled alone. I'll learn Portuguese. I'll meet people. And I traveled alone plenty before I married your father. You just don't remember because you weren't born yet. This is insane. You're 62 years old. Exactly. I stood up too, feeling steadier than I had in months. I'm 62, not 92. I have decades left to live, and I intend to live them on my own terms. Charlie's face cycled through emotions. Disbelief, anger, something that might have been panic. What about selling the house? What about finding a place? We had plans. You had plans. I picked up my book again, a signal that this conversation was over. I have a plane ticket. He left without another word, and I heard him thundering down the stairs, his voice mixing with Rosie's in urgent, muffled conference. I didn't care what they were saying. For the first time since Craig died, I felt fully alive. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. I woke at 4:30 Sunday morning, my body humming with anticipation. Through the guest room window, dawn was just beginning to bleed into the darkness, painting the suburban street in shades of possibility. My single suitcase sat by the door like a faithful dog, packed with everything I needed to disappear from the life they'd planned for me. The house was tomb quiet. I moved through it like a ghost, making coffee in their kitchen one last time, eating toast that tasted like freedom. At 5:45, I heard the taxi's engine purring in their driveway. I left the key to my house on the kitchen counter, along with a note I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. Charlie, here's the house key. I've decided to keep the property for now. The lawyer has power of attorney for any necessary business while I'm away. I'll be in touch when I'm settled. Mom. No forwarding address, no timeline for return, no promises of regular contact. The taxi driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a slight accent, helped me with my suitcase. Early flight? He asked as we pulled away from the house where I'd been dying slowly for 6 weeks. The earliest, I said, watching Charlie's neighborhood shrink in the rearview mirror. I couldn't wait another minute. The flight from Boston to Recife took 14 hours with a layover in Miami. I'd expected to feel anxious, traveling alone to a country where I didn't speak the language, but instead I felt something I'd almost forgotten: excitement. The elderly woman beside me on the second leg struck up a conversation in broken English mixed with Portuguese, and I found myself laughing for the first time in months as we tried to communicate through gestures and smiles. Primeira vez no Brasil? She asked, and somehow I understood. First time in Brazil? Sim, I said, proud of myself for remembering the Portuguese for yes. New beginning. She patted my arm with weathered fingers. Boa sorte, she said. Good luck. I was going to need it. Recife's airport buzzed with energy that felt like electric current under my skin. The heat hit me the moment I stepped outside. Thick, tropical, alive. The taxi ride to my hotel took me through neighborhoods that shifted like a kaleidoscope. Modern high-rises giving way to colonial buildings painted in jewel tones, palm trees swaying over cobblestone streets, the ocean appearing and disappearing between buildings like a blue promise. The Hotel Casa Colonial sat in the heart of Recife Antigo, the historic district. The lobby was small but elegant, with Portuguese tiles and fresh flowers that perfumed the air with something sweet and unfamiliar. The desk clerk, a young woman named Beverly, spoke careful English with a musical accent. Welcome to Recife, Senora Mitchell. Your room overlooks the courtyard. Very quiet. very peaceful. My room was simple but charming. Whitewashed walls, a comfortable bed draped with mosquito netting, French doors that opened onto a small balcony. I stood there as the sun set, listening to the sounds of a city coming alive for the evening, music drifting from restaurants, conversations in Portuguese that sounded like singing, the distant rhythm of waves against stone. I was alone in a foreign country with no plan beyond staying alive and awake. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt more myself than I had since Craig's funeral. My phone buzzed. A text from Charlie. "Mom, please call. We need to know you're safe." I turned the phone off without responding. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my windows and the sound of church bells. I'd slept 10 hours, the first full night's sleep I'd had in months. My body felt different, looser, as if I'd been carrying tension I didn't realize existed. I dressed in a cotton sundress I'd bought specifically for this trip, feeling foolish and free in equal measure. Downstairs, Beverly greeted me with coffee strong enough to resurrect the dead and directions to the nearest market. "Is your first time shopping in Brazil?" she asked, her English improving with practice. "First time doing anything in Brazil?" I admitted. "Ah." Her smile was warm with understanding. "You are a brave woman. My grandmother, she traveled alone to Argentina when she was 70. She say it make her feel young again." Young again. I liked the sound of that. The market was a revelation. Vendors calling out in Portuguese, fruits I didn't recognize piled in pyramids of color, the smell of spices and fresh bread mingling with ocean salt. An elderly vendor with bright eyes and missing teeth insisted I try something he called açaí, a purple smoothie that tasted like berries and possibility. "Muito bom?" he asked, grinning as I nodded enthusiastically. "Muito bom," I agreed, and his laugh was infectious. I spent the morning wandering, getting lost and finding myself again, accumulating small victories, successfully ordering lunch using my phone's translation app, finding my way back to the hotel without asking for directions, understanding when a shopkeeper asked if I needed help. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and tried to call my sister, Everly. It went to voicemail. "Hi, it's Pamela. I'm in Brazil." "Yes, Brazil. I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'll call you again soon." I hung up before I could second-guess myself. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Charlie and 6 text messages, each more desperate than the last. "Mom, please answer your phone. We're worried about you. Just let us know you're okay. This is ridiculous. You need to come home. Rosie thinks we should call the police. At least tell us where you're staying. Mom, I'm sorry about what I said. Can we please talk?" The apology came too late, buried beneath days of demands and complaints. I deleted all the messages without responding. 3 days into my Brazilian adventure, I met Scarlett. She was sitting alone at a cafe near the beach, a woman about my age with silver hair braided with colorful ribbons and skin bronzed by years of sun. She was reading a book in English, something by Isabel Allende, and when she looked up and smiled, I felt an instant connection. "American?" she asked, her accent placing her somewhere in the American Southwest. "Guilty as charged." I gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Mind if I join you?" "Please." She closed her book, marking her place with a napkin. "I'm Scarlett, from Phoenix originally. Now I'm from wherever I happen to be sleeping. Pamela, from Boston originally. Now I'm from here, I guess." Scarlett's laugh was rich and uninhibited. A fellow refugee from responsible adulthood. How refreshing. Over the next hour, she told me her story. A widow like me, but 5 years further along in her journey. Her children had tried to manage her grief, her money, her choices. One day, she'd packed 2 suitcases and left for Mexico. That was 3 years ago. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Only that I waited so long." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with conviction. "They think we're supposed to shrink as we age, become smaller and more manageable. But I refuse. I'm becoming larger, not smaller. More myself, not less." My son called me another mouth to feed. Scarlett's expression hardened. "And what did you say to that?" "I bought a plane ticket to Brazil." "Good girl." She raised her coffee cup in a toast. Here's to refusing to be fed to the machine of other people's convenience. That afternoon, Scarlett showed me parts of Recife I never would have found alone. A hidden beach where locals gathered to watch the sunset. A restaurant where the owner's grandmother cooked traditional dishes. A bookstore where the owner spoke 5 languages and recommended authors I'd never heard of. The secret to traveling alone at our age, Scarlett said as we walked along the beach, is remembering that we've earned the right to be selfish. We've spent decades serving other people's needs. Now it's our turn. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from Rosie. Pamela, I don't know if you're getting Charlie's messages, but we're really concerned. The kids are asking where you are, and honestly, this whole disappearing act is pretty selfish. You're their grandmother, they love you, and they're confused about why you left without saying goodbye. Please call us back, we can work this out. Selfish. The word they used when women chose themselves instead of everyone else. I played the message for Scarlett, who snorted with disgust. Classic manipulation, she said. Weaponizing the children's emotions to control you. My daughter pulled the same routine when I wouldn't move into the assisted living place she'd picked out. The grandchildren miss you, Mom. Don't you care about family? What did you do? I sent the grandchildren postcards from every country I visited. Turns out they thought my adventures were way more interesting than Sunday dinners where everyone stared at their phones. That night, I composed my own message to Charlie. Not a text or voicemail, but an email that said everything I needed to say. Charlie, I received your messages. I'm safe, healthy, and happier than I've been since your father died. I'm staying in a lovely hotel in Recife, Brazil, where the people are kind, the weather is perfect, and no one treats me like a burden. I know you're concerned, but your concern feels hollow after what you said to me. Another mouth to feed, as if I hadn't fed you for 18 years. As if I hadn't supported your dreams and ambitions, as if the money I contributed to your household was charity rather than payment for the privilege of being tolerated in my own son's life. I raised you to be better than that. I'm disappointed that you became exactly what I hoped you wouldn't. A man who sees his mother as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be respected. I don't know when I'll return to the States, or if I will. That decision is mine to make, not yours to schedule. If you want to maintain a relationship with me, you'll need to earn it back. Apologies buried in demands and manipulation don't count. The children can reach me by email if they want to know about their grandmother's adventures. You can reach me the same way if you have something meaningful to say. Otherwise, don't. I'm not another mouth to feed anymore. I'm a woman with choices, and I'm finally making them. Pamela. I sent it before I could reconsider, then turned off my phone and went to bed with the windows open, listening to the sound of waves and freedom singing me to sleep. 2 weeks into my Brazilian exile, I woke to find 27 missed calls from Charlie. 27. The number glowed on my phone screen like an accusation. Each unanswered ring a small rebellion I'd never allowed myself before. I made coffee on the small burner in my room, Brazilian coffee that could wake the dead, and listened to his voicemails in chronological order. The progression was fascinating. Anger morphing into panic, demands dissolving into pleading, authority crumbling into something that almost sounded like desperation. Mom, this has gone on long enough. You need to come home. The kids are asking questions I don't know how to answer. Rosie's been calling senior services, worried you've had some kind of breakdown. Please just call me back. We can work this out. I'm sorry, okay? I said I was sorry. What more do you want? What more did I want? The question echoed in my mind as I sat on my balcony, watching the sun paint the courtyard in shades of gold. What I wanted was the past 6 weeks of my life back. I wanted the version of my son who would never have called his mother another mouth to feed. I wanted my husband alive and my identity intact and my place in the world unquestioned. But since I couldn't have any of that, I wanted something else entirely. I wanted them to understand what they'd lost. Scarlett found me at our usual cafe an hour later, my laptop open and my fingers dancing across the keyboard with purpose. You look like a woman with a mission, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I'm starting a blog. The words surprised me even as I spoke them. About traveling alone at 62. About refusing to be invisible. About choosing yourself when everyone else wants to choose for you. What's it called? I turned the screen toward her. Another mouth to feed. Scarlett's delighted laughter drew stares from other patrons. Oh, honey. You're not just finding yourself. You're weaponizing yourself. The blog's first post practically wrote itself. 2 weeks ago, my son told me I was just another mouth to feed. Today, I'm writing this from a cafe in Recife, Brazil, where the coffee is strong, the people are kind, and nobody treats me like a burden that needs managing. I'm 62 years old. I've been a wife, mother, real estate agent, volunteer, friend, and caregiver. I've paid taxes, raised children, supported communities, and buried the love of my life. I've earned gray hair, laugh lines, and the right to make my own choices about how to spend whatever time I have left. Yet somehow after my husband died, I became a problem to be solved. Too sad for family dinners, too quiet for the children, too present for comfort. The solution? Warehouse me in a place with activities designed for seniors where I could play bridge and wait to die without depressing anyone. Instead, I bought a plane ticket. This blog is for every woman who's been told she's too old, too much, too inconvenient. For everyone who's been managed instead of loved, tolerated instead of treasured. For anyone who's ever been made to feel like a burden when they should be celebrated as a survivor. We are not another mouth to feed. We are women with stories, wisdom, and decades of life left to live. And we're done apologizing for taking up space. More from Brazil soon. Pamela Mitchell, currently not another mouth to feed. I published it before I could second-guess myself, then immediately shared it on the Facebook account I'd barely used since Craig's death. Within an hour, it had been shared 12 times. By evening, 37 people had commented, women mostly, sharing their own stories of being dismissed, managed, and marginalized by adult children who confused control with care. Pamela. This gave me chills. My daughter did the same thing after my husband passed. Thank you for saying what I couldn't put into words. You're living my dream. Keep writing. The comments kept coming, each one a validation I hadn't realized I needed. I wasn't crazy or selfish or irresponsible. I was just a woman who refused to disappear on someone else's timeline. Scarlett leaned over my shoulder, reading, "You've struck a nerve. A good nerve or a bad nerve? The best kind. The nerve that's been pressed down and ignored for too long." That evening, my phone rang again. This time I answered. "Mom?" Charlie's voice was strained, unfamiliar. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know. I got your messages." "Then why didn't you call back?" I walked out to my balcony, where the evening air carried the scent of jasmine and possibility. "Because I didn't want to talk to you, Charlie. I still don't, really." The silence stretched between us, filled with all the words we'd never learned to say to each other. "I saw your blog post," he said finally. "Did you?" "Mom, you can't just air our family business online. People are reading it. My coworkers, Rosie's friends. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing. Not hurtful or revelatory or true. Embarrassing. "Which part embarrasses you most?" I asked. "The part where you called me another mouth to feed, or the part where I decided to feed myself? That's not... I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it exactly?" Another silence. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, younger. "I don't know. I was stressed. Rosie was on my case about money. The kids needed school supplies, and you were just there, all the time, looking sad. I was grieving. I know that. But it was hard, watching you be so..." He searched for words. "So empty. Like Dad took all the good parts of you with him." The observation hit like a physical blow because it was true. I had been empty, hollowed out by loss and dependency. But emptiness wasn't permanent unless you let it be. "You're right," I said. "I was empty. But instead of helping me fill up again, you decided I was too much work. So you pushed me toward the easiest solution. Stick me somewhere with other empty people and visit occasionally out of obligation. That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me honestly, Charlie. When you suggested those senior communities, were you thinking about my happiness or your convenience?" The silence was answer enough. I'm not angry with you for being overwhelmed, I continued. Grief is hard on everyone. But I'm furious with you for treating me like a broken appliance that needed to be disposed of rather than repaired. I'm your mother, not your burden. I know that. And I'm sorry. I really am. But this running away to South America thing, it's not solving anything. It's solving everything. I leaned against the balcony railing, watching couples stroll hand in hand through the courtyard below. For the first time in months, I wake up excited about the day. I'm learning Portuguese, making friends, discovering parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. I'm not empty anymore, Charlie. I'm full. But for how long? You can't just live in a hotel in Brazil forever. Why not? Because that's not real life. That's vacation. Eventually you have to come home and deal with reality. Whose reality? The question hung between us like a challenge. My reality is that I'm 62, healthy, financially independent, and capable of making my own choices. Your reality is that you want me to be the mother you remember, the one who lived for her family and never asked for anything in return. But that woman died with your father, Charlie. This is who I am now. So you're just going to stay there? Forever? I'm going to stay here as long as it makes me happy. And when it stops making me happy, I'll go somewhere else that does. I might travel through South America. I might rent an apartment in Lisbon or take a cruise around the Greek islands. I might come back to the States and buy a condo in Florida. But whatever I do, I'll do it because I choose to, not because you think it's appropriate for a woman my age. Charlie's breathing was audible across the international connection. What about the grandchildren? Don't they matter to you? The manipulation was so smooth I almost missed it. Almost. Of course they matter. But you know what matters more? Teaching them that women don't become disposable when they get older. That grandmothers are whole people with their own dreams and desires, not just sources of babysitting and baked goods. That's not... He stopped, perhaps realizing the futility of arguing with someone who'd already voted with her feet. I have to go, I said. Scarlett's taking me to a samba class tonight. Samba class? Dancing, Charlie. Something I haven't done since your father got sick. Something that makes me feel alive. Mom, wait. Please, can we try to fix this? I looked out over the city lights of Recife, each one representing possibilities I was still discovering. You can try, but not by asking me to come home and pretend this conversation never happened. If you want to fix this, you'll have to figure out how to love the woman I am now, not just the mother you remember. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, feeling something shift inside me like tectonic plates settling into new positions. For 41 years of marriage and 26 years of active motherhood, I'd defined myself by my relationships to other people. Craig's wife, Charlie's mother, the woman who showed up, who served, who smoothed over difficulties and made everything easier for everyone else. But that woman had been buried with Craig, and the one who'd emerged from the grief was someone different. Someone who took samba lessons and wrote blogs and made friends with strangers. Someone who chose her own adventures instead of waiting for permission to live. The next morning, I extended my hotel reservation for another month and booked a Portuguese tutor. If I was going to stay in Brazil, I wanted to understand the language that had become the soundtrack to my rebirth. Scarlett found me at breakfast, grinning like she'd won the lottery. I read your second blog post, the one about last night's samba class. It was therapeutic to write. It was brilliant to share. The post has been shared over 100 times already. You're becoming famous, querida. Famous. The idea should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like another small victory in the war I was finally winning against invisibility. 3 months after my escape to Brazil, my blog, Another Mouth to Feed, had 23,000 subscribers and a book deal. I stared at the email from the publisher, reading it 3 times before the reality sank in. A memoir. They wanted me to write a memoir about late-life liberation, about refusing to be managed into irrelevance. You're crying, Scarlett observed from across our favorite cafe table. Happy tears, I said, wiping my eyes with a napkin that smelled like sea salt and possibility. Someone wants to pay me to tell my story. Of course they do. You've given voice to thousands of women who thought they'd lost theirs. The book advance wasn't enormous, but combined with my other resources, it meant I could live anywhere I wanted for years. More importantly, it meant my words had value beyond the therapeutic release of writing them. I was no longer just Craig's widow or Charlie's inconvenient mother. I was Pamela Mitchell, author. The identity tasted sweet on my tongue. My Portuguese had improved enough that I could navigate complex conversations with my tutor, Rebel, a retired literature professor who'd become both teacher and friend. That afternoon, we were discussing Brazilian poetry when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Grandma Pamela? The voice was tentative, young, female. Cynthia? My heart lurched. I hadn't heard from my granddaughter since leaving Boston. Yeah, it's me. I hope it's okay that I called. Dad gave me your number. I stepped away from Rebel, moving to a quieter corner of the cafe. Of course it's okay. How are you, sweetheart? I'm good. Different, but good. She paused, and I could hear teenage uncertainty in the silence. I read your blog. The words hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure would hold our weight. All of it, she continued. Every single post. And I have to tell you something. What's that? I was relieved when you left. The confession hit like a physical blow. Relieved? Not because I don't love you, Cynthia said quickly, but because, God, this is hard to say, because you were so sad all the time, and nobody knew how to fix it, and it made everyone tense. Mom and Dad were always whispering about you, and George started asking if you were going to die too, like Grandpa Craig. I closed my eyes, remembering those weeks of being a ghost in their house, bringing my grief to their dinner table like an unwelcome guest. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be sorry for being sad, Grandma. Be sorry for thinking we could fix you instead of just being with you while you figured it out yourself. The wisdom in her 15-year-old voice stunned me. When did you get so smart? Probably around the time my grandmother became a badass blogger who moved to Brazil and started living her best life. I laughed despite the tears streaming down my face. Language, young lady. You literally wrote a blog post titled How to Say No in 7 Languages. I think we're past worrying about my language. She was right. That post had been inspired by my Portuguese lessons, but it had become a meditation on the power of refusal in all its forms. It had been shared more than any other post I'd written. Cynthia, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think less of me for leaving the way I did? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then she spoke, her voice stronger than before. I think you're the bravest person I know, and I think Dad doesn't understand that yet, but he's starting to. What do you mean? He's been different since you left. Quieter. He actually apologized to Mom last week for something. I don't know what, but I heard him say he was sorry for not seeing things from her perspective. That's never happened before. The irony wasn't lost on me. My absence was teaching my son lessons about presence, about the weight of words, about the consequences of taking people for granted. He misses you, Cynthia continued. They all do. Even Mom, though she'd never admit it. She keeps cooking for 5 people instead of 4, and your favorite tea is still in the cabinet. And you? I asked. Do you miss me? Every day. But I also love knowing you're out there being amazing. Your blog posts make me feel like maybe I don't have to shrink myself to fit into other people's ideas of who I should be. My granddaughter, learning from my rebellion. The thought filled me with fierce pride and terrible responsibility. Cynthia, I want you to know that leaving wasn't about not loving you and George. It was about loving myself enough to refuse a life that was slowly killing me. I know. And Grandma? That's the most important thing you could teach me. After we hung up, I sat in the cafe for a long time, watching tourists navigate the cobblestone streets with their cameras and guidebooks. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is George. Cynthia gave me your number. Can you send me a postcard from Brazil? The coolest one you can find. I want to show my friends that my grandma is cooler than theirs. I laughed until the other cafe patrons stared. My grandson, asking for proof of my adventures to share with his peers. Not shame about his runaway grandmother, but pride. The next message was from Rosie. Pamela, I owe you an apology. I've been reading your blog, and I see now how dismissive I was of your grief and your needs. I was protecting my family's routine, but I forgot that you were family too. I'm sorry. Finally, a text from Charlie. Mom, I know I don't deserve a response, but I need you to know that I've been going to therapy, learning about grief, about how families can hurt each other when they're scared. I said terrible things because I didn't know how to help you, and I was afraid of losing you the way we lost Dad. Instead, I lost you anyway. I'm working on becoming the son you deserved. No timeline pressure, no conditions. Just wanted you to know. I stared at his message for a long time. Therapy. Charlie, who'd always prided himself on handling everything alone, was asking for help. The man who'd called me another mouth to feed was learning that some hungers couldn't be satisfied with mere sustenance. They required understanding, patience, love. Scarlett found me crying into my coffee an hour later. Bad news? She asked, sliding into her usual seat. The opposite. I showed her the messages. I think I might have accidentally taught my family how to miss me properly. Accidentally my ass. Scarlett grinned. You orchestrated this perfectly. You removed yourself from their lives so completely that they had to confront what your presence actually meant. It wasn't calculated revenge. The best revenge never is. It's just living so well that other people realize what they lost. That evening, I sat on my balcony with my laptop, crafting what I knew would be my most important blog post. Today I received messages from my family. Apologies, admissions, love disguised as regret. 3 months ago, they treated me like a burden. Today, they're treating me like a person they miss. The difference isn't that I became more valuable. It's that I became unavailable. For too long, I confused being needed with being loved. I thought if I made myself indispensable, if I was always there, always helpful, always convenient, I would earn a permanent place in their lives. Instead, I became furniture. Useful, expected, ignored until I was gone. Distance taught them what presence couldn't. That love isn't about what someone can do for you, but about who they are when they're free to choose their own path. My son is in therapy. My granddaughter is learning to value her own voice. My daughter-in-law is apologizing for dismissing my grief. None of this happened because I stayed and fought. It happened because I left and lived. This is my last post from Brazil, but not my last post as a free woman. Next month, I'm traveling to Portugal to research my next book. After that, maybe Greece, maybe New Zealand, maybe back to the States. But if so, it will be as a visitor to my own life, not a prisoner of other people's expectations. To everyone who's been following this journey, your comments, your shares, your own stories of late-life liberation have meant everything to me. We are not another mouth to feed. We are women with appetites. For adventure, for respect, for lives that belong to us. Keep choosing yourselves. Keep taking up space. Keep refusing to shrink. Until the next adventure, Pamela Mitchell P.S. Charlie, if you're reading this, I love you. I'm proud of you for seeking help. When you're ready to have a relationship with the woman I am now, not the mother you remember, I'll be ready too. But it will be on equal terms, as two adults who choose to love each other, not as an obligation you're managing. I published the post and closed my laptop. Tomorrow I would start packing for Portugal. Tonight I would have dinner with Scarlett and dance until my feet hurt and sleep with my windows open to the sound of waves. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Charlie. I love you too, Mom, and I'm proud of you. Travel safely. We'll be here when you're ready. Not to manage you, but to know you. I smiled and turned off the phone. For the first time in months, I didn't need to know what came next. I only needed to know that whatever came next, I would choose it myself. Outside my window, Recife sparkled with lights that promised nothing and everything. I was 62 years old. I was free, and I was just getting started. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.